The worst part of moving in with my brother wasn't the lack of privacy, or his annoyingly perfect gym schedule, or even the fact that he never remembered to put the seat down. It was that he brought his best friend over, constantly. Luca. Luca had been around since they were both kids, and I'd always sort of hovered at the edge of their world, the awkward little brother tagging along, tolerated but mostly ignored. But now, at 22, after losing my job and crawling back home with my tail between my legs, I was fully immersed in it, whether I liked it or not. The moment I stepped into the house, dragging a suitcase that felt like it weighed more than my pride, there he was, Luca. Shirtless, of course, sprawled on our worn-out couch like it was his, flipping through TV channels with the kind of entitlement only lifelong best friends could get away with. "Look who finally showed up," he grinned, tossing me a lazy glance over his shoulder. "Guess the city chewed you up and spit you out, huh?" I shot him a look. "Nice to see you too, Luca." He laughed and turned back to the TV, utterly unbothered. That was his thing. He had this infuriating way of saying things that could easily be insults, but somehow made you feel like you were part of some inside joke you didn't remember agreeing to. My brother, Theo, walked in from the kitchen with 2 beers, tossed one to Luca, then looked at me. "You settle in okay?" "Not yet," I muttered, eyeing the stairs. "Just got here." "Cool. We're watching the game if you want to join." I nodded, even though I had zero interest in basketball. I had even less interest in being alone upstairs, unpacking and thinking about how badly I'd screwed everything up. So I slumped onto the armchair while Luca sprawled more, spreading out like he owned the entire couch. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Luca was always around, eating our food, laughing too loud, making subtle digs at me that I couldn't tell were flirtatious or just his brand of teasing. He'd lounge in the kitchen shirtless in the mornings, act surprised when I came downstairs like I was the guest. But one night, everything shifted. Theo had gone out to meet his girlfriend for dinner, leaving me and Luca alone in the house. It was one of those late summer nights where the air felt thick, like it was pressing against your skin. I'd just come back from a walk, still slightly sweaty, and found Luca sitting at the kitchen table, nursing a beer and scrolling his phone. He looked up as I walked in. "Didn't know you went for walks." "Didn't know you lived here," I replied, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. His smirk deepened. Feisty. I rolled my eyes and leaned against the counter. "I'm not uptight." "You kinda are." I stared at him. "You kinda think you know everything." He stood up slowly, beer still in hand, and walked toward me. My breath caught, not because I was afraid, but because he was closer than I expected, the heat of his body strangely noticeable in the sticky summer air. "I know you've been looking," he said, his voice quiet. I blinked. "What?" "At me. Whenever I'm around, you look." I felt my face go hot. "You're full of yourself." "Maybe," he shrugged, "but I'm not wrong." And then he stepped back, just like that, like he hadn't just said something that made my stomach twist and my skin buzz. "I'm crashing here tonight," he added casually, walking past me toward the stairs. "Your brother said it was cool. Guest room's taken, though. Hope you don't mind sharing." I turned slowly. "Sharing what?" He glanced back over his shoulder, that smug grin back on his face. "His bed, unless you want to offer yours." I didn't answer. Couldn't. My heart was pounding in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. And that was how it started. I didn't offer my bed. I didn't say anything at all. I just watched him walk up the stairs like he hadn't just flipped my whole world inside out. And I hated, really hated, how the idea of Luca in my bed wasn't immediately repulsive. It should have been. He was my brother's best friend. Practically family. An arrogant ass. But the part of me that should have shut it all down, it stayed quiet. Too curious. Too aware. That night I didn't sleep. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Luca stretched out in Theo's bed, just down the hall, probably snoring with zero awareness of the mess he'd made in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd see that look he gave me, the way his voice dropped when he said, "You look," like he knew something I didn't want him to. The next morning, I made coffee like a zombie, bleary-eyed and barefoot in the kitchen. The house was quiet, and I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it all, until I turned around and saw him. Luca, wearing only a towel, hair damp, a toothbrush hanging from his mouth. He froze in the doorway like he wasn't expecting me either. "Oh," he said, around the toothbrush. "Morning," I blinked. "Seriously?" He glanced down at himself, grinned with foam still in the corners of his mouth. "Chill. Your brother's seen worse." "Yeah, well, I'm not Theo." He cocked his head. "You sure about that?" I swallowed whatever sarcastic reply I had and turned back to the coffee maker. I wasn't about to get dragged into one of his games. Not with this much skin involved. He finished brushing and leaned against the counter across from me, towel slung dangerously low. "You always this tense in the morning?" "Only when strange men hijack the bathroom." He laughed. "You wound me." "Try wearing pants." He gave me a wink and walked off, and I didn't breathe until I heard the door shut behind him. The coffee was lukewarm by the time I remembered to drink it. The day passed in fragments. Theo was in and out, and Luca had vanished somewhere. Jim, maybe. I kept telling myself it was over. That he'd made a dumb joke, that I was reading into it, that nothing was actually happening. But that night, it happened again. I'd just gotten out of the shower, damp hair towel wrapped, scrolling on my phone when a knock came at my door. I expected Theo. Instead, it was Luca, fully dressed, this time in sweatpants and a tank top, barefoot. "Hey," he said. "Your brother crashed at Cassie's." I nodded slowly. "Okay." He scratched the back of his neck. "Guest room's still a disaster. Mind if I?" "You already asked last night." I cut in, stepping aside. He gave me a little smile, walked in without hesitation, and dropped onto the far side of the bed like it was nothing. Like this was just normal. No questions. No rules broken. "Thanks," he said, folding his arms behind his head like he was on vacation. "You're not bad to room with." I slid into bed, tense, keeping a safe distance. Luca shifted to his side, facing me. "You always sleep that far over?" "Only when the alternative is spooning my brother's best friend." His eyes gleamed. "You say that like it's a bad thing." I turned to face him, the space between us still visible but charged. "You always like pushing people like this?" He shrugged. "Only when they react." "You think I'm reacting?" "I think," he said, inching closer until I could feel the heat of him, "you've been reacting since I got here." His fingers brushed my arm, casual but intentional. I froze, heart thudding so loud I was sure he could hear it. "I should probably say stop," he interrupted softly, "if that's what you want." I didn't. I couldn't. He moved even closer, now just inches away, and I felt every breath he took like it was mine. His hand hovered near my hip, not touching, just waiting, and then the lights flickered. Power surge. We both flinched. The moment shattered. I rolled over abruptly, back to him. "Good night, Luca." There was a pause. Then, "Night," he said, voice unreadable. I stayed facing the wall, every nerve alive, every inch of me buzzing with what almost happened, and what still might. The next morning, Luca was gone. Not gone, but not in my bed, not on the couch, and not in the kitchen where I found a half-eaten protein bar and an empty glass in the sink. Just enough evidence to prove I hadn't dreamed the whole night. I should have been relieved. I wasn't. I felt like someone had paused a movie right before the climax and walked away with the remote. When Theo came back from his girlfriend's around noon, everything snapped back to normal. The three of us ended up playing video games for a while, just like old times, I guess. Only this time, I couldn't stop watching Luca from the corner of my eye, and every once in a while, I'd catch him doing the same. But neither of us said a word about the night before. That pattern continued over the next few days. Normal on the outside. Jokes, small talk, late night takeout runs, but the air between us, it buzzed. He'd sit closer than necessary. Our knees would brush, and neither of us would move. Sometimes, he'd pause when our eyes met, like he was waiting for me to say something. but I didn't. And neither did he. Until Friday. Theo had gone out again. He and Cassie were basically playing house now, and I was alone in the living room when Luca strolled in, tossing his hoodie onto the arm of the couch. "Movie night?" he asked, already grabbing the remote. "Sure," I said, suddenly hyper-aware of the fact that we were totally alone again. He picked some stupid action movie. Explosions, muscle cars. I barely registered any of it. My attention was split between the glowing screen and the occasional way Luca's hand would rest too close to my thigh on the couch cushion. Then, about halfway through, I felt it, his fingers brushing mine. I didn't move. He didn't pull away. We sat there like that, just barely touching, like teenagers scared of their own feelings. My heart pounded. My mouth was dry. I didn't even pretend to watch the movie anymore. Finally, he spoke. Quiet. Careful. "Is this weird for you?" I turned to him. His face was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. A vulnerability, maybe. "Define weird," I said. He smiled faintly. "You know what I mean." I nodded slowly. "Yeah. It's weird." He looked down at our hands, still barely connected. "But not bad weird?" I hesitated. "No." A beat passed. His hand fully took mine then. No more brushing, no more pretending. And he held it, thumb tracing my knuckles like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I didn't plan any of this," he said quietly. "You being here, I didn't expect it to feel like this." "Like what?" "Like I can't stop thinking about you." I swallowed hard. "You're Theo's best friend." "I know," he said, eyes still on our hands. "That's why I've been trying to not do anything stupid." "And this?" I asked. He looked up at me again, still trying not to. "But you're not exactly making it easy." I stared at him, wondering what the hell was happening, wondering if I was about to destroy something, or finally let something real begin. "I don't know what this is," I said, "or what it's supposed to be." He leaned closer, not enough to kiss me, just enough that I felt the tension crackling between us. "Me either," he said, "but I want to find out." And before I could think of a response, the front door opened. "Theo." We sprang apart like guilty kids. Luca launched into some fake comment about the movie, and I nodded along like I hadn't been seconds away from kissing my brother's best friend in the living room. Theo didn't seem to notice, but Luca and I both knew. We'd crossed a line, and there was no going back. For the rest of the night, I couldn't look Theo in the eye. Not because I'd done anything, technically. Not yet, but because something had shifted between Luca and me, and it was sitting just under the surface, waiting to break through. After the movie ended, Theo crashed early. He said he was wiped from spending the day with Cassie's niece, and honestly, I was glad for the exit. I needed space. I needed air. But Luca didn't leave. I went to the kitchen to grab a glass of water and found him leaning against the counter, like he'd been waiting. "So," he started, voice low. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. "That was almost something," he said. "Wasn't it?" "Almost?" I echoed, setting my glass down with a quiet thud. Then Theo walked in. He nodded, pushing his hands into the front pocket of his hoodie. "You think he knows?" I laughed quietly. "He's oblivious." "Good," Luca said. Then, more quietly, "I don't want to screw things up with him." "And yet," I said, glancing at him, "here you are, in my kitchen, at midnight." He gave me a crooked smile. "Yeah, here I am." A long silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, loaded, like we were standing on the edge of something big, and neither of us knew if the drop would be worth it. I finally asked, "Why now?" He looked at me for a long moment before answering. "Maybe I didn't let myself think about it before. You were always just Theo's little brother. Off limits, but then you moved in and it got harder to ignore." "And what is it you're trying to ignore exactly?" "That I look at you way too long. That I think about you when I shouldn't. that when we're alone like this, I can't stop imagining what it would be like to... He stopped himself. To what? I asked. His jaw tightened, but his eyes softened. To see what would happen if I didn't stop. The air between us changed, just like before. But this time, no one was coming through the door. No excuses, no distractions. I stepped closer. So don't stop. His breath hitched just slightly. That was all I needed to know. He felt it too. I expected him to lean in fast, to kiss me without thinking. But he didn't. He just looked at me, eyes flicking between mine, like he was memorizing everything. And then he reached up, fingers brushing against my jaw, thumb grazing my cheek. The kiss was slow, careful, like he was testing the weight of it, like he was afraid if he pushed too hard, I'd vanish. But I didn't. I leaned in. His hand moved to my waist, pulling me closer until our bodies were flush, and it hit me all at once. How badly I'd wanted this, how long I'd wondered what it would be like to be touched by someone who'd always been just out of reach. When we finally pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "This is dangerous," he whispered. "I know," I said, "and I don't care." Neither did I. We stayed like that for a while, just breathing each other in. It wasn't even about lust at that moment. It was something else. Recognition, familiarity, something unspoken that had been there for longer than either of us had been willing to admit. But eventually, we pulled apart. "Should I go?" he asked, voice quiet. I thought about it. About Theo. About what we were doing. But I also thought about how I felt with Luca's arms around me. Safe. Seen. "No," I said. "Stay." He did. We didn't do anything more that night. Just laid in bed, close enough to feel each other's warmth, but not touching. It was enough. For now. The morning after, everything felt different. Not in some dramatic, earth-shattering way. More like the quiet shift of something that had finally clicked into place. But the problem was, nothing else in the world had changed. Not Theo. Not the house. Not the way Luca poured cereal like he hadn't kissed me in the kitchen less than 12 hours ago. He sat at the table, hair still damp from the shower, wearing one of Theo's hoodies like it was no big deal. I watched him from the doorway, unsure how to even begin a conversation. "Want some?" he asked, nodding at the cereal box without looking up. I crossed the kitchen slowly, pulled a bowl from the cabinet, and sat across from him. "So we're just gonna act like that didn't happen?" He spooned cereal into his mouth and chewed. "No, I just didn't think this was a talk over cereal thing." "Okay," I said. "So what kind of thing is it?" He glanced up at me, something cautious in his expression. Still figuring that out, I nodded, even though it didn't answer anything. It was like we were in some strange limbo. What we did meant something, but neither of us wanted to put words to it. Theo walked in a few minutes later, yawning and rubbing his eyes. "Damn, you guys are up early," he mumbled, going straight for the coffee. Luca grinned. "Some of us are productive, bro." I kept my face neutral, spooning cereal into my mouth like my life didn't feel like it had flipped upside down. Theo didn't notice a thing. We all hung out that afternoon, but the undercurrent between me and Luca never faded. Every time our eyes met, it was like a silent confirmation of something real, something we hadn't made up. But it also came with a weight. How the hell were we gonna keep this from Theo? That question became harder to answer that night. Luca stayed over again. Of course he did. But this time, Theo knocked on my door before bed. "Yo," he said, poking his head in. "Luca's crashing again. Can he take your bed tonight? I'm wiped and I really need a solid sleep without him stealing my blanket." I blinked. "You want me to give up my bed?" Theo shrugged. "Just for tonight. Couch isn't that bad." Before I could come up with an excuse, Luca appeared behind him in the hallway, shirtless again, of course. And leaning against the wall like this wasn't complicated at all. "I'll make it up to you," he said, grinning. "Promise." Theo didn't even look twice, just clapped me on the shoulder and left. Luca followed me into my own bedroom like he hadn't just stolen it from me under the guise of friendship. Once the door closed, the grin dropped. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm sleeping on the couch." You don't have to, he said, voice quiet. Luca, he stepped closer. We can just sleep, like last time. I hesitated. But the truth was, I didn't want to sleep alone. Not when he was right there. Not when everything in me still buzzed from last night's kiss. So I nodded. Okay, this time, we didn't keep a safe distance. I lay on my side, Luca's chest pressed against my back, his arm resting lightly around my waist. His breath was warm against my neck, and everything about it felt natural. Too natural. This is gonna get complicated, I whispered. Already is, he murmured. But you don't care? There was a pause. Then, I care more about what this is than about keeping it easy. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. My fingers found his and laced with them under the covers. We fell asleep like that, wrapped in a mess we couldn't define. I woke up to sunlight warming my face and the weight of an arm draped across my chest. For a second, I forgot where I was. Then I felt the steady rhythm of his breath against my shoulder and the slow realization that Luca was still in my bed. Still here. Still wrapped around me like we were something more than just a mistake or a secret. I didn't want to move. Not because I was afraid of waking him, but because I didn't want to return to the version of my life where this didn't exist. But of course, we couldn't stay in that bubble forever. A knock hit the door. Too sharp, too sudden. My heart stopped. Luca's eyes flew open at the sound, and before either of us could react, Theo's voice came through the door. Hey, breakfast. Cassie's coming over, and we're doing pancakes. I swallowed hard. Yeah, be right down. Silence followed, then footsteps faded down the hall. Luca and I lay frozen, like kids caught doing something they shouldn't. We should talk, he said quietly, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. No shit. He sat up slowly, raking a hand through his messy hair. I don't want to sneak around, but I also don't want to ruin anything. You mean with Theo? He nodded. You think he'd be okay with it? I let out a slow breath, sitting up beside him. I don't know, but I can't keep pretending like nothing's happening either. Luca looked at me then. Really looked at me. Then let's not pretend. Let's figure it out, together. It was the first time either of us had said anything out loud that resembled commitment, and it scared the hell out of me, but it also felt right. The rest of the morning was painfully normal. Luca played it cool, I tried, but everything was tinged with awareness. How we stood too close in the kitchen, how our eyes met across the table. Theo didn't notice, or maybe he didn't want to. It wasn't until later that day, when Luca left to run errands, that the truth caught up with me. Theo and I were in the living room, half watching some documentary. He was scrolling on his phone when he suddenly asked, So you and Luca, you guys good? I blinked. What do you mean? He shrugged. I don't know. Just feels like something's changed. You guys are acting different. My heart stuttered. Different how? Theo looked at me with that annoying older brother insight. You tell me. I hesitated, then said, If I told you something, would you freak out? He raised an eyebrow. Should I be sitting down for this? You're already sitting. Touché. I took a breath. I like him, I said, and I think he likes me too. Theo didn't speak, just blinked at me like he was trying to replay what he just heard. Wait, you and Luca? Yeah. A long pause. Then, to my utter shock, he just nodded. Okay, he said. Okay. Dude, he said, smirking. You think I'm that oblivious? I've known for a while. I just didn't want to call it out until you guys figured it out yourselves. I stared. You're not mad? He shrugged. As long as you're happy, and he doesn't mess with your head. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thanks. Just don't make it weird. No promises? He laughed, shaking his head. Seriously though, you deserve something good. For the first time since this whole thing started, I believe that maybe, just maybe, I had it. When Luca came back later that afternoon, I met him at the front door. He stepped inside, tossing his keys in the bowl by the entrance, and looked up, startled by how fast I was walking toward him. "Hey!" I didn't let him finish. I grabbed the collar of his hoodie and kissed him. Hard. Fast. Honest. He responded immediately, arms looping around my waist like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. And when we finally pulled apart, both of us a little breathless, I said, "I told Theo." Luca blinked. "What?" he asked. I told him the truth. He stepped back, searching my face for some trace of regret. "And?" "He's not mad. He kind of already knew." Luca laughed, disbelieving, rubbing the back of his neck. "Man, I was bracing for some big blowout." "Me too," I said, but he surprised me. "So what now?" I smiled. "Now? We stop pretending. No more sneaking around. No more walking on eggshells. If we're doing this, we do it." Luca's smile widened. "You sure you're ready for that?" "I've never been more sure." He pulled me in again. Slower this time. Hands sliding down my back. When our lips met, it wasn't rushed. It was steady, grounded, like we were both finally on the same page. That night, we didn't sleep in fear of being caught. We slept with the door open, like any other night, and no one batted an eye. It wasn't a dramatic shift, just a quiet one, and that made it feel even more real. Weeks passed. Theo gave us space but never made things awkward. Luca started staying over more often, then just stopped leaving. His shoes found a permanent spot by the door. His toothbrush took residence in the bathroom. Eventually, so did he. It was the little things that made it feel like something more than a fling. How he'd make me coffee in the morning, just the way I liked it. How he'd quietly drag a blanket over me if I fell asleep on the couch. How he'd whisper something stupid or sweet right before bed, always when he thought I was almost asleep. One night, we were lying in bed, lights off, his arm draped across my waist. "I used to think you were annoying," he murmured against my shoulder. I snorted. "You still think I'm annoying?" "Yeah," he said, "but now I find it endearing." I turned to face him, even though I could barely make out his features in the dark. "You're such a sap." He leaned in, kissing the corner of my mouth. "Only for you." And in that moment, I knew something I hadn't dared to believe when I first moved back in with Theo. I wasn't just crashing here anymore. I was home.